to living pure.
Are boundaries biblical? Can saying no be an act of love? Here at Living Pure, we believe that God created us as whole people with a spirit, mind, and a body to have relationships, a purpose, and faith that all work together. When one area is struggling, it often affects the others. But when healing begins, it has a beautiful way of spreading throughout our lives. I'm your host, Marsha Brown, and I'm so glad you've joined me today. So today's topic is one I think many Christians wrestle with. Are boundaries biblical? Maybe you've heard things like, if you were really loving, you would always say yes. Or maybe you've heard, Jesus never had boundaries. Maybe this one, Christians should always put others first. Or maybe you felt guilty for saying no. How many people have ever felt guilty for protecting your time? Or what about maybe you felt guilty for stepping away from an unhealthy relationship? Now this one is huge, and I feel this one all the time. Maybe you feel guilty for resting. If that's you, I hope that today's episode gives you freedom, because I believe healthy boundaries aren't selfish. They're biblical. Okay, let's dive in. So first of all, I want us to talk about what is a boundary. When people hear the word boundary, they often picture walls, like cold, distant, keeping people out. But that's not what a healthy boundary is. A boundary isn't a wall. It's a fence with a gate. Walls say no one gets in. But a healthy boundary says, I choose what comes in, and I also choose what stays out. Boundaries define responsibility. They answer questions like what belongs to me and what belongs to someone else. Where do I end and where do you begin? Many of our relationship problems begin when those lines become blurred. And how many of you guys realize that boundaries began in creation? So let's go all the way back to the book of Genesis. One of the first things that God did was create boundaries. He separated light from darkness. He separated land from sea and day from night. God established order through boundaries. Creation itself is structured by its limits. Then God gave Adam and Eve one boundary. He said, in the garden, everything is yours except for this one tree. God wasn't withholding goodness from his people. He was teaching trust. Even paradise had boundaries. Think about that. Boundaries weren't introduced because of sin. They existed before the fall. And let's look at Jesus. Even Jesus had boundaries. Sometimes people say, but Jesus always helped everyone. But did he? Jesus loved everyone. Sure he did, but he didn't meet every request he had that was given to him. He didn't heal every sick person in Israel. He often withdrew to lonely places to pray. He left crowds that wanted him to stay. He didn't allow people's expectations to dictate his mission. In the gospel accounts, there are moments when the crowds are searching for him, yet Jesus said he must go elsewhere because his Father has called him to another town. He wasn't driven by urgency. He was led by purpose. That's a very important distinction. Sometimes we're exhausted because we're living according to everyone else's expectations of us instead of going by God's calling. So let's talk about love being love without boundaries. Is it really love? You know, this may sound surprising, but love without wisdom often becomes enabling. Imagine someone constantly borrowing money without changing their behavior. Or how about someone repeatedly violating your trust? Doesn't feel very good. Or imagine someone verbally abusing you, but expecting unlimited access to your life. You know, many Christians think love means unlimited access, but that's not how healthy relationships work. Even God gives people freedom to reject Him. He loves perfectly, yet He honors boundaries. Healthy love doesn't control. It also doesn't allow itself to be continually destroyed. Boundaries protect relationships. You know, people often think boundaries damage relationships, but actually, healthy boundaries often save them. Without boundaries, resentment grows. Exhaustion can grow, and then bitterness can grow. And then one day, what happens is we explode. Healthy boundaries allow us to remain loving because we're no longer living beyond our capacity. Sometimes the most loving sentence we can say is, "I love you, but I can't do that." Both parts matter. So let's talk about the difference between selfishness and stewardship. In Matthew 22:39, Jesus tells us to love our neighbors as ourselves. Notice He doesn't say instead of ourselves. There's an assumption there that healthy self-care already exists, right? So your body, your mind, your relationships, your time, your gifts, they've all been entrusted to you by God. You're called to steward them wisely. And when we continually ignore our own limits, we're not demonstrating holiness. Sometimes we're simply ignoring the way that God designed us to be. Even Jesus slept. He ate. He rested. He stepped away. If the Son of God embraced rhythms of rest, why do we believe we shouldn't? Okay, so let's talk about boundaries in our families. As someone who studied family systems, I find this especially fascinating. Families often develop unhealthy patterns without even realizing it. One person becomes the rescuer, another becomes dependent, one carries everyone's emotions, someone else avoids conflict altogether. Where do you recognize yourself in the family system? These roles can continue for decades. Healthy boundaries begin when someone lovingly says, "I take responsibility for my choices, and I'll allow you to take responsibility for yours." Sometimes the entire system pushes back. Why? Because systems resist change. But healthy change is still worth pursuing. Okay, so what about boundaries and forgiveness? Here's one of the biggest misunderstandings. Forgiveness doesn't automatically restore trust. Forgiveness is something that I choose, but trust is something that is rebuilt. If someone repeatedly lies to you or lies to me, that I can still forgive them, but that doesn't mean I'm going to hand them my car keys tomorrow. If someone has been abusive to me, I can still release the bitterness that I feel inside, but that doesn't mean I'm going to place myself back in harm's way. Forgiveness changes my heart, but boundaries protect my wisdom. Both can exist forever together. So why do we struggle to set boundaries? Why is this so hard? Often it's because we're afraid. We're afraid people won't like us. We get scared that they'll leave us. We don't want to disappoint people. We're so afraid that they'll call us selfish. And this is something that many of us learned early on in life because we felt like that love had to be earned. So we become people pleasers. Okay, so recovering people pleasers, raise your hand. I'm one. If you are one, I see you. We overfunction. We rescue. We jump in to rescue quickly. And we say yes when our hearts are screaming no. But here's the truth. If someone only loves the version of you that never says no, they don't actually love the real you. Healthy relationships can survive healthy boundaries. I'm going to say that again. Healthy relationships can survive healthy boundaries. So, what are some practical ways to begin setting boundaries? Let me leave you with a few simple practices. First, pause before answering requests. My husband taught me this one. Instead of immediately saying yes, try saying, let me think about that for a little bit. Don't be afraid to slow things down. If they're trying to speed it up, that's a red flag. Almost everything can be slowed down. Second, pay attention to resentment. Resentment often signals that a boundary needs attention. If you resent what you're doing, you need to reevaluate. Is this for me? Third, remember that someone else's disappointment doesn't automatically mean you've done something wrong. People are allowed to feel disappointed. You're allowed to make healthy decisions. People may try to guilt you into saying yes. Don't let them. And fourth, pray before you respond. Ask, God, am I acting out of love or am I acting out of fear? Follow the still small voice that's inside of you. That one question has changed many decisions in my own life. So, as we're wrapping up, I always want to visit the 5 pillars that we base our podcast on. This particular topic, pure faith, we know God values wisdom. So when you're setting boundaries, just ask yourself, this boundary, am I using wisdom in setting this decision? And a pure mind. Our nervous system needs safety. So as I'm setting this boundary, do I feel safe in the decisions I'm making? Pure relationships. Love and limits belong together. Pure purpose. We know that saying yes to every opportunity, if we're going to fulfill the calling God has given us, is not a realistic thing. So it's okay to say no to some of those things. And then pure health. Burnout isn't a badge of honor. It's a signal that something needs attention. So living pure doesn't mean living without limits. It means living within God's good design. So this week, I'd like to ask you have you ask yourself 3 questions. Number 1, where am I saying yes when I really need to say no? Number 2, where am I carrying responsibility that actually belongs to someone else? And number 3, where might God be inviting me to trust Him enough to establish a healthy boundary? Because every no to something unhealthy creates space for a better yes. So this week, I challenge you to reflect on those 3 questions and see where you can look at some places that you might be able to set some new boundaries in your life. So thank you so much for joining us on Living Pure. If today's conversation encouraged you, would you take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, leave us a review, and maybe share this episode with someone who may need permission to embrace some healthy boundaries? Next week, we're going to continue to explore the beautiful intersection of faith, relationships, and neuroscience as we discover how God designed us to flourish, not to just survive. Until next time, don't just survive your life, live it well. I'll see you next week.
Good morning, good light. Rise and shine today. Welcome to Living Pure.